Oh, wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys doing that every time. Today, we're just gonna go ahead and continue reading a book that I hadn't gotten into about a year ago. Was the last time we did a reading of this book. Here is the playlist. I go ahead and created it now that we have three parts. It's called Comparative Philology, Origin of Culture in Ancient America. And what we read in this book was so good. If you haven't seen these two parts, we got an hour about here and about 2 hours here. That's 3 hours of reading of the book. Again, part one, it says here Comparative Philology. America had all the old world languages. Black Caucasia. Oh man, that doesn't even describe the video, but this is part two. Comparative Philology says the connection of culture in Asia and America, old world languages. But we went over so much good information, guys. So I'm going to start reading where we left off last time. This was almost a year ago. Some of you might be lost for what I'm saying and what is this book about. I really highly recommend that you watch parts 1 and 2 so you're not so lost, after this if you or just go there right now and watch this later. That's what I actually recommend, but it'll make sense if you watch parts 1 and 2. Again, I'm just gonna pick up where we left off last time. It's gonna be a short video because it wasn't much that we had to read left in this book, but I wanted to finish it, guys, before I forgot, and I had forgotten. That's why I hadn't read it in a year. I was supposed to get back into it so we can finish it, but let's go ahead and finish it together today. All right. Again, that book is Researches in Prehistoric and Protohistoric Comparative Philology, Mythology, and Archaeology in connection with the origin of culture in America. All right. The origin of culture in America, guys, and the Akkad or Sumerian families, where in America, the origin of whatever you're calling that, Sumerian, in America. And again, I'm not the only one saying this. This was written by Hyde Clark. I didn't write this. He's a member of the Anthropological Institute, core member of American Oriental Society, and of the Byzantine Philological Society, former member of the American Anthropological Institute as well. This is from 1875. And we're going to go where we left off last time, guys. It's not much more that we have to read, but I wanted to make sure we finish this book. All right. We were over on page 58 in part 2. Again, I did that video about a year ago. And we're just now getting back and finishing the book. Let's go ahead and do that today, guys. They were talking over here in the Sumerian influence in Brazil. As you guys see, if not that the Sumerians had settlements there, is that the Guarani word for town is Taba. That is Taba teach, etc., of geography. The Daba of the present Georgians. All right, it's all related, is what they're telling you. This is what we learned in this book. Again, if you're new to this, make sure to catch the first 2 parts, guys. You're going to see, so you're not so lost when, hearing and what we're reading today. It says, if the Sumerians had at any time a settlement on the great river mouths, the passage of the Atlantic would be credible in the knowledge of the Atlantic Ocean by the geographers of Babylonia and Pergamos accounted for. Under this head of topographical nomenclature, a course of investigation is being pursued by the Reverend Professor John Campbell of Montreal and formerly of Toronto, which can be consulted with great advantage. In the Canadian Journal, and under the titles of the Horites and of the Shepherd Kings of Egypt, Professor Campbell has adopted as his basis the genealogies of the books of Genesis, Kings, and Chronicles. Right? With the help of the Egyptian and classic data, he is bringing to bear a flood of light upon the Sumerian epic of civilization with regard to the genesis and migration of nations and the mythology of the period. All tends to illustrate the importance of the protohistoric era. Much of this work is necessary, tentative, and although there are few illustrations with regard to America, these memoirs can be profitably consulted by the investigator in common with those of Lenormand and the Egyptologist. Of course, in Bryan and many of the old mythologists, many of the collateral facts may be found, but treated in a manner incompatible with our present knowledge. Upon the grand question of the population of Canaan, Professor Campbell gives us invaluable materials for forming a judgment. This population most probably extended into Egypt, where Brooks Bay has found 400 parallel names and in which I took for the Turanian element. Thebes and the other old names by which Egypt was known to the Greeks are Sumerian, so called, because that all turns out to be Assyrian script. There is no such thing as Sumerian. Sumerian, Sumer was a place. Anybody coming out of Sumer was referenced as Sumerian. It wasn't a specific nation. We're talking about like anybody coming out of California is called a Californian, but he could be Chinese, he could be so-called black, right? He could be Mexican, he could be many people, right? Include Californian. That's my point. So they're saying at least that these so-called Egyptian words might be coming back from a more ancient language. The intercourse with Kadia long continued. The union of Sumerians with Semites explains the ethnological peculiarities of the Jews, who are evidently a mixed race with two elements. As to the ancient extent of the Sumerian region, in America, it cannot yet be determined, for it must have been wider than at the Spanish conquest. But with regard to the names here given for the New World and the Old, it must be borne in mind that some are Aga and extend into Brazil. So, what I want to remind you as well is, of course, these people always seeing it in reverse, that these old world nations came here. But again, we came out from here. This is the true old world. They're seeing it in reverse. So, influence of Brazilian indigenous tongues to the Agab languages. The consideration of the Brazilian river names gives us a test in relation to those of Europe, and they confirm the opinion I have given of an Aga influence in Europe anterior to the Sumerian, and which will have to be taken into account by the craniologist. He has to provide for the Vasco-Colarian, the Aga, and the Sumerian migrations. The whole of the phenomena of man in America represent an arrested development of civilization, cut short as compared with Europe and Asia, not by climate, as in Africa, and yet quite sufficient to include the two epics of great stone monuments and of palatial works with inscriptions, epics which embrace the first spiritualized religion, that of the worship of light, a time of 1,000 years, so remote that in the old world it has now only its scanty votaries among the Parsis of Bombay. Time, too, so remote that the great religions of the globe, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, had, with Buddhism, got time to expand and to cover the Eastern Hemisphere, while until the Spanish conquest, the Americas had, in the flux of centuries, never heard their revelations. So this is what I'm saying, guys. So this is again seen in reverse. When we talk about biblical stuff, you're talking about Judaism and all that. When we're relating, what is Judaism? What is it supposed to be? It's supposed to be about the so-called Jews, right? The Jews, these were a family, a people, a real people that lived in ancient Americas. So all that's happening here. They're seeing it again in reverse. That was here. The Spanish didn't bring that here. Nothing new under the sun. They just rebrought it and brought their own mix to it, right? Few things so strongly portray the deep, dark gulf of separation as this, when associations which had been commonly shared from the beginning of mankind were snapped in the time of their deepest interest and moment, and it was hazard and not design placed the Indians that perished and the Indians that continued under the teaching of the missionaries of Spain and Portugal. All right, Sephardic Jews and Moors, Spain cryptos, conversos, moriscos, marranos, and Catholics. Yeah, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, a black man, and which all have not yet known. The evidence of language comes in support of this arrest of the development, for there are no languages in America of the latter and higher forms. When the early ACCAD stopped, they all stopped. This it is which gives the false impression of there being a peculiar and special American grammar. This has been so specially studied and treated, whereas the languages in America, which cannot be rightly called American languages, are under the same conditions of prehistoric grammar as the earlier languages of the old world. So we got to dodge the hijack big time. And what he means is because he's realizing that What he's finding here, the philology, is related to old world languages. So he's concluding automatically that that was people that came from other parts of the world and brought it here, like they're the fusionists, the whole hijack that there wasn't nobody here. But again, they're seeing all this in reverse. It is American languages. The mother tongue started here. So languages of the old world. The grammar of Omagua may be as truly called Caucasian as American. And if we choose that of Abkhaz, might be as rightly named American as Caucasian. As there was in the furthest or prehistoric days a stream of emigration continuously from the old world to the new, and this is what I was just saying, you see? He's saying a lot of people coming in prehistoric times. Remember, prehistoric times is the foundation of the world, and that was here in America. Remember, the Masons told us that. When you're talking about prehistory, then you're talking about America. When we're talking about prehistory, antediluvian, as we've learned in the other book we're reading, right? Researches into the lost histories of America, with all those Greek tales and Atlantis stories that was here. There was real people, all these gods, all these titans that was here. Apply that to what we're reading right here. See, they're seeing it in reverse. They're explaining it here in reverse. He's saying there was a lot of continuous immigration from the old world to here, but he's saying in reverse. We went over there. The question arises whether this set back again and whether a knowledge of the new world was carried to the old. Of course it was. Again, they're calling the other side the old, but that's what the Atlantis story is. They carried that story to the real new world, what they call the old. The first set of population appears to have been over Bering Straits or across the narrow seas, and migrations which could cover the eastern world, even with Akhaz and Bushmen from Lapland to South Africa would be able to fill America, from the snowy pole to Tierra del Fuego, as there is witness enough to show in blood and speech and in folklore. So now he's conjecturing that all these old world cultures must have came through the Bering Strait, because that's the only thing they can imagine. They won't even imagine that these people had ships and stuff. If anything, if they were coming, why they got to come through Bering Strait? Why couldn't they have ships, right? But the whole point is, we navigated the ancient world, guys. Check out my ancient navigation videos of America. That we went out from here. Start of civilization, agriculture, building, language, all that, as we've read already. He even titled this book, The Origin of Culture in America. It is very questionable whether at any time there was regular intercourse over the Atlantic, for that would have needed ships, see, and a trade once set up. Other animals beside dogs and other plants than those of now found would have followed man. But you see, now he's saying dogs followed man here, and that's something he doesn't know, that dogs originated in the Americas. So that debunks him right there. This is what I'm saying. He's seeing it in reverse. Yeah, we brought them out from here. Camels, mammals, all that. Check out my ancient animals video. And other plants than those now found would have followed man. And what we know of the historical period under the Greeks and the Roman and lively knowledge of America was lost. The Greek could not reach it from the west, and the Romans, when they settled on the shores of the Atlantic, had other cares than to risk the wide dark sea. All right, so-called Greeks and Romans, who were the real people by that name or being tagged that. Many different peoples included in those tags. Many nations made up the Greeks. Many people made up so-called Romans. A dead knowledge lingered. So he's just talking about, oh, they forgot about the Americas. They forgot. No, they hid the knowledge in history when they started writing history. A dead knowledge lingered, not only for the geography of the Americas, but of Australasia, which is of no less interest with regard to the latter region, because the exhibits philologically evidence of early migrations to the Minkopi or Pygmian in Borneo, of the Sandan or Nyamnam of the now in Tasmania, and of the Aga in Galela, and in other languages recorded by Wallace. There was indeed a system of geography, long prevalent among the ancients and in the Dark Ages, which is referred to in the Timaeus of Plato, and was notably maintained by Crates of Pergamos, 160 BC. Renaud, Journal Asiatique, Volume 1, New series, 1863, page 140, and also referred to by Virgil in the Aeneid or Aeneid. Four inhabited worlds. Remember that when they said Aeneid, they meant America. We just learned that in the other book, right? Last week, I believe. The Aeneids, they always meant America. Four inhabited worlds were treated of, and there appears to have been in tradition an imperial title of monarch of the four worlds, not just three continents, but four, the ancients knew. This I connect with the statement of Mr. George Smith that Agu, an ancient king of Babylonia, called himself king of the four races, again with Prescott, who in the Conquest of Peru, Book 1, Chapter 2 says, "It is certain that the natives had no other epithet by which to designate the large collection of tribes and nations who were assembled under the empire of the Incas than that of Davintinsuyu, or four quarters of the world." He quotes Onde Garde, Rel Graham manuscript, and Garcilaso Commentary Real, the second, chapter 11. This title was perhaps a prerogative of the Middle King or monarch of the Middle Kingdom, of the great civilized empire of the world. The Chinese preserved the tradition of the Middle Kingdom, the trinary, having followed the quaternary system. Thus, in Genesis, there are three sons of Noah. The Vedas refer to three worlds. The nomenclature of Ptolemy and other geographers is of the Akkad epic and that of the early biblical books, Akkad or Babylonian. The school of Pergamos taught that the world which must have been treated as a sphere contained four worlds. Ours was one of these, and as it's true in Asia that it does not cross the line, so it was supposed that Africa does not cross the line, and the Babylonian geographers were well acquainted with southern Asia, but not with southern Africa. This northern world was balanced by an austral world, and this is so depicted in the Australasian islands, the scene of Sumerian migrations in Australia, which was known to them. Australia was by the Sumerians, as by far later geographers, supposed to extend from opposite Asia as a terra incognita of the maps opposite Africa. A not less remarkable affirmation was that the northern world and that of Australia were balanced on the other side of the globe, also by a northern world and continent and by a southern world. And this is so in North and South America. All right, they were talking about the Americas a lot of the time. And remember, when they were saying Australia, it didn't always mean the continent of Australia. Antarctica was called Australia. Australia meant southern continent. That's what Australia means. It was said, being nigh the truth, that these four worlds were cut off by belts of oceans, one from north to south, and by another running around the middle of the world from east to west. Such ocean, we know, shuts off Asia from Australia, and those ancients might be forgiven, who drew a sea over the narrow necks between North and South America, which must then as now have been passed by canoes at passages on the Atrato and other rivers. These four worlds were alleged to have their men, as we know they have and have, but to account amid so much truth for intercourse not taking place between them in their days, a fable was got up that these seas were made impassable. The philosophers, however, forgot to tell us how the knowledge of these other worlds and the men in them was gained. So basically, what he's trying to explain is, when they're talking about these four worlds, even the Vatican knew that there was four continents or four worlds, because in their time, supposedly there was only three known, and so they were missing a fourth one, and that was a legend, and that was always the Americas. That's what they're saying here. Gained too it was and lost by the cessation of intercourse after the Sumerians with the Americas. This was perhaps owing to the rise of a great power in China, which disturbed the road from India and the seats of kingdom in southern Asia. How that dream of a true globe and its continents and people reached the Greeks and Romans, and how it suggested to the flatterers of Augustus a title of monarch of those four worlds, is here accounted for. It must be traced beyond Pergamus to those older schools of learning known to us under such a name as Chaldean, ancient Ireland, but which had flourished in protohistoric epochs from the dawn of civilization. There must at one time have been in the olden world men who could bring back this knowledge of the Americas from their Nineveh to the Nineveh and Babel. So from their Nineveh, our own, they're saying from there, and to its Nineveh and Babel, the ones they know, where the empire of the four worlds got centered. So that's the thing, they don't know it's the same place. And it was here in America, the true ancient world, and where one language was spoken and written for the government of the earth, the mother tongue. How truly was it then said of Babel? And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. Genesis 11:1. The fall of that power was indeed confusion of nations and of tongues. After a time, the tradition alone of these other worlds lingered, and we have seen as a theory of cosmography lingering to be condemned by the Christian Church as a thing that men of learning ought not to learn, but reproduced in our own language by Sir John Mandeville. He insisted that the world was a globe and could be circumnavigated, and he tells a tale of a man from Norway who had gone so long by land and by sea that he had environed all the earth, that he was come about to his own marches. The intercourse in times of yore between the new world and the old, now again brought to light, rests upon no slight evidence. Although the whole of it cannot be included here, it comes in confirmation of the labors of those who have gone before me, and of my own, carried on step by step for some time. The relationship of the topographical nomenclature and of the languages of the Old World with those of the New was laid down by me in my paper on the comparative grammar of the Egyptians last year. You guys hear that? So again, you guys, if you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I mean, he did so much comparison. He broke it down. You guys can see he linked up certain nations with certain nations, from different continents together, just on the language alone. So that's what he's saying. That's what he means by comparative philology or comparative grammar. And on this one, he used the Egyptian. He said, I did that last year. What is now published is the development and detail of the same principles, which had occupied me for many years, but which have not till now been brought nearer to complete exemplification. It may be briefly said that my object now has been to show the development of language and prehistoric grammar, and the unity of language in all continents, and more particularly the unity of culture generally throughout the world, by dealing with what has been regarded as the exceptional position of America. Many points are not touched, not from want of knowledge, but want of space. All that has been here stated will be found in conformity with the results obtained by other inquirers on the prehistoric and protohistoric epochs, and will throw a light upon their labors. It is hoped that many portions will, in this respect, be found of general use beyond their special application. The development of language, mythology, and culture, generally, the migrations of nations, the naming of animals, the naming of mountains, of rivers, and of towns are here illustrated, not only in the infancy of mankind, but in the institution of a great civilization, so ancient that its traditions had become dim, and that its history has to be recovered from beneath the rubbish mounds of its cities. Mounds. The history of the fall of such empires and of such kingdoms. We're talking about these empires and kingdoms of ancient America that they wrote out of history, they made us forget about, is a tempting subject, but it is one which belongs rather to the historian, for it took place in the ages of history, than to the students of the Anthropological Institute. The results may, however, be considered by us, for they show that the history of savagedom and of civilization is the same for both halves of the globe, or is the same, sorry. In America, the forms of savagedom are better preserved, and this gives us some of the most valuable elements for filling up what is on our side wanting. The American materials are also of none the less value because they help to build up the uniform history of civilization. of progress, which may be long delayed by barbarism, but cannot in the end be checked. It is a progress amid which, while the oldest and rudest races may still live, their rudest propensities and habits are doomed to decay, and their bloodiest superstitions to be abandoned. The philological considerations are, in this sense, also of interest, because language is not only, as here used, a history of culture, but a great and living instrument of culture. All right? Language is part of culture, showing relations of possible similar cultural affinities with certain nations in the world that may be very far separated since ancient times. Its influence is, of course, a disturbing one as well, and hence, although not decisive for ethnological determination, it is nonetheless to be regarded. It is nonetheless to be regarded. Speech is the heir, the representative, the transmitter of the accumulated experience of civilization in 1,000 years. Hence, its apostolic power, in proportion to the improved capacity of transmission and cultivated languages. So will such languages influence a lower race to which they are communicated and by which they are used. So a low race acquiring a high language becomes more capable of improvement and makes greater advances than the low race which retains a rude tongue. Of this, there are examples enough, and in Central and South America, the acquirement of the Spanish tongue has given large populations means of advancement which they do not possess in the Quichua or Maya, which were before written, any more than in Guarani, which the Jesuits put in writing. By the help of Spanish, the people and their leaders of pure Indian blood, now in power, have become orators, poets, lawyers, able to take place alongside of those of old Spain. The effect of race remains but a great advance in due speech. The infusion of race wished for by some can only be effected by the deterioration of the better, or it will be compensated for by the practical annihilation of the weaker. But the fusion of language is a great and safe instrument for bringing about among various populations a harmony of civilization. English will thus act in India. It is civilization which is the best heritage of mankind, and the more this can be brought within the compass of all, even of the meanest, the greater will be the benefit conferred upon the whole. All right, and we're going to continue here, and it says the appendix table of Sumerian words. Again, Dutch the hijack guys. I hate to like. He's calling it Sumerian. This is an Assyrian script. They're calling Sumerian. The following is a brief list of words divided into three regions: the American, including two columns. And while in some cases a root may be traced throughout it, it will be seen that more commonly the Western and American roots or types cross in the Indo-Chinese region. This table may be much extended. So these are the abbreviations, as you guys can see. So right here at the top, those are the abbreviations, right? And here's the table. Western, so it says man, Indo-Chinimon, Peruvian, Kakari. Look at Kara, Karu, Kari, Ukari. Same thing. Mulu, Lu, as you guys can see. All right. So I'm gonna just put up some music, go a little slow so you guys can compare. right, so that was some of the table there, guys. It says here discussion. Consul Teji Hutchinson, being called on by the president, said he was afraid to enter into this discussion in commenting on the deep philological research displayed by Dr. Hyde Clark or on the extensive knowledge of warlike instruments for which Colonel Lane is so well known. But he had his doubts about the possibility of learning the grammatical formations of languages from such tribes as those Dr. Clark spoke of in Western Africa. Their dialects were all unwritten, and it had been observed by Captain Adams that the Tower of Babel might have been built on the west coast of Africa. See how they, Afrocentric, gosh, the hijack. So numerous and varied were the idioms spoken there. For his own part, he believed in what we have to learn of the anthropology of past people, much more from their works of art than from what should be considered as guesses at philology. So, we've gone over so many books, guys, comparing all the language and dialects they found here. They're saying as numerous as in Africa, or possibly even more than in Asia and Africa, the languages they found here in the ancient Americas. He was happy to tell the meeting that the collection of copper implements of cloth, of pottery ware resembling what, or that excavated from Priam's Ilium by Dr. Henry Schleiman, of silver works of art and other matters brought by him from Peru, were now arranged at the Bet now Green Museum, and in a short time the catalog of them would be ready. Dr. Leitner gave an account of the origin, progress, system, and present attitude of the Indo-Germanic school of philology, and considered that Dr. Hyde Clark's researches, which he illustrated by coincidences derived from Arabic and his own Dardu discoveries, as well as those of all scholars and independent inquirers, deserved every encouragement for the sake of the cause of truth, and as a protest against the literary terrorism exercised by a set of syncretists who now monopolized attention in certain leading societies and journals, erroneously supposed to be devoted to impartial investigations. The collection of material, historical, ethnological, and other, was far more important than the preservation of this or that philological theory. We were on the mere threshold of the science of language. The Indo-Germanic group was with some stretching scientifically classified, whilst the affinities of the Shemitic languages had never been doubted. The terms, however, of Turanian or Turan, and even of Hamitic, were a mere euphemism to express the absolute ignorance to that vast number of languages which yet remained insufficiently examined or unknown. Mr. R.G. Halliburton said, I have listened to this discussion with much pleasure, not only on account of the importance of the subject before us, but also on account of the liberal spirit which has been evinced. For bigotry, unfortunately, is not confined to the theologians, but is often as unreasoning and intolerant in science as it is in religion. Mr. Clark's conclusion that there has been a connection between the religions and civilizations of the New and Old worlds has been confirmed by a very careful investigation of my own, extending over 20 years into the identities existing between the calendars, festivals, and astronomical ideas of savage races in America, Polynesia, Africa, and Asia. These coincidences are very striking and very conclusive, and I hope before long to submit the result of my labors to the notice of the public. All right, we're going to have to get into his work as well, but he's letting you know that through the study of what he's saying, a study of ancient calendars, festivals, astronomical ideas of the indigenous people of the world, he noticed the similarities in that there was communication or some relations between these cultures or nations in the old world in America. So-called old world over there, they mean the other side of the world. This is the true old world. Of course, there's going to be relations and communication. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. They've been seeing in reverse, and to them, this is a surprise. Like, oh, wow, look what we're finding. So he's saying, just like Dr. Clark was able to determine this, again, if you watch part 1 and 2, you'll see he did it through philology, through language. Now, if you study agriculture, you're gonna find America. If you start studying architecture, navigation, you're gonna see it's all gonna lead back to the Americas. It's gonna connect to the old ancient America. There are proofs that there must have been repeated intercommunication between the races of the new and the old world prior to the days of Columbus. All right. I mean, we've already proven that so much. So evident is this conclusion. So evident. Listen, these are scholars. They're telling you, but of course, this didn't make it to the history books, right? In our schools, right? Elementary school. Of course, they edited all this out. He's saying it's so evident. It's so obvious, so evident in this conclusion that some writers have tried to establish that the origin of the religions and the civilization of the old world must be sought in America. Listen to what he just said right there. Body bag for the illusion. All right. It's so much evidence. It's so evident. It's so obvious that there was communication. It's so obvious. We're finding the original forms of all these legends and mythology, right? We read the other book the other day, Researches into the Lost History. We're talking about the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology. They were talking about the Americas, all these old world cultures, right? The Vikings, all this. They were talking about the Americas, all these mythical lands. They were talking about the Americas, and he's letting you know it was so obvious, so much proof of that, that a lot of writers realized, not that they thought, they realized, they found proof, they were convinced that the origin of religions and of the civilization of the old world must be sought in America, just like the Masons said in that book, right? All right, I hope you guys are listening right now. We have in the New World monuments of the Stone Age similar to those found in Denmark and elsewhere. We have coincidences in the calendars of the races inhabiting both continents, which cannot be accidental. In architecture, the resemblances are most striking. The grouping of Mexican pyramids I have found to be the same as that observable in Egypt, and a similar symbolism is to be traced in some of the groups of mounds in the New World, which is to be noticed in prehistoric structures of the old. Again, this is the old. We brought that knowledge over there. That's why they look similar. We have Cyclopean masonry in Peru and symbols which are conspicuous in the temples of the old world. Again, all these old world inscriptions found here. There can be no doubt that we are on the eve of important discoveries. And Mr. Hyde Clark, by his valuable paper, has pointed out very clearly how much we have to learn and how much remains to reward the labors of the Anthropological Institute. Mr. J. Jeremiah John said, in reference to the remarks of Mr. Halliburton in relation to his labors in American archaeology and his conclusions respecting the astronomical characteristics of the Mexican and Egyptian pyramids, that in a work in his collection entitled The Lost Solar System of the Ancients Discovered by Mr. John Wilson, published in 2 volumes as far back as 1856, the same conclusions are stated. Listen, they're talking about America being the origin. That's a whole book we haven't even gotten into, guys. We're going to definitely look for that one too. But how far correct he was, not this evening prepared to say. The work abounds with apparently accurate measurements of all the then known great megalithic monuments in Europe, Asia, Africa, and America, and elaborately detailed and worked out to show that they were constructed in accordance with the Oriental astronomical system. They're calling it Oriental because they're saying that started over there. See, this is what I'm saying. If they only knew what they were saying, if they only realized that they were seeing it in reverse. And it may be remarked that the valuable paper we have listened to goes very far to support some of Wilson's arguments. It seems a pity that the labors of years at times turns out to be already forestalled in the main by some unknown work published years ago, as in the case of the honorable gentleman who preceded me. Mr. Hyde Clark has proceeded upon strictly scientific grounds, and whether we premise the descent of the human family from one or more pairs, his researches will always afford the student much material for carrying on the impartial study of the history of man in the vast continent of America, and assist the comparative study of the progress of the human mind in every part of the ancient world. Colonel Lane Fox, Senor de la Rosa, and the president also made some remarks. Continuing, it says here, note in page 69, Mr. R.G. Halliburton's discovery of the year of the Pleiades. Mr. Halliburton states that in the Mexican pyramids he has found the grouping to be the same as the observable in Egypt, the three groups, and in some of the groups of mounds of the New World. This does not state the whole truth of a most important discovery, which will lead to a knowledge of the obscure origin of the Egyptian system of learning and that of the American monuments, right? It is something far older than the Egyptian system, or as that is in antiquity, and will place the earlier American mound building migrations at a very early period, far beyond that of the Sumerians, chiefly referred to by me. All right, if you didn't understand what they just said right there, Mr. Halliburton's telling you it's older, America way older, far beyond that of Sumerians and the so called Egyptian system. Older than the Egyptian system, very early period, far beyond that of the Sumerians. We're talking about the mounds in America, the migrations, huh? Where did they go? In the pyramids mentioned, there is one large sun pyramid, one smaller moon pyramid, and seven little pyramids grouped, as I observed, three in a trinity with the sun pyramid and four with the moon pyramid. Mr. Halliburton has not yet been able to explain this to me, but the symbolism must have its value. The connection of the seven has, however, been established by Mr. Halliburton that they are the seven Pleiades of the bull, when these seven in the middle of November are in a line with the five of the bull, and these with the three in Orion, and with the dog star. We have a series of 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the epoch of a prehistoric new year, marked by the festival of the dead. Right? This is talking about Mexico. The Pleiades constituting a cross or Tau are also recognized as a paradise of the souls of men. On the day of the Pleiades, festivals are still held throughout the world. This great day was also one of human sacrifice. Traces of its observance are almost universal in the Old World and the New, and in the passage of communication in the Fiji Islands. A whole volume of symbolism is to be deduced not only from the myths, but from the numbers 3, 5, and 7, and the unrolling of which will give us new and trustworthy results. These investigations will probably assist us in arriving at the animal origin of the constellations and signs of the zodiac. This may be based on the facts at page 24 and 25. All right. And now we got another note. It says here, note on page 38, early metalworking. Very valuable materials on early metalworking and its synchronism with comparative mythology. All right. Just like we learned in the last book, right? The mythology and the metal and the crown and what does it all mean? The copper, the bronze, where they're getting all this from, will be found in the papers of Miss A. Buckland in the Journal of the Anthropological Institute and the Westminster Review for January. And here they're just showing another book by this author we might get into in the future. His memoir on the comparative grammar of the Egyptian, Coptic, and Ude. And he also compares a lot with the American languages. All right, and we've reached the end of this book, guys. I know this was like I said, this was going to be a short reading. I just wanted to make sure we finished the book. You guys helped me read a whole book together. We read a whole book, another book, another book checked. Check it off your list. All right, researches in prehistoric and protohistoric comparative philology, mythology, and archaeology in connection with the origin of culture in America, the origin of culture in America, and the ACCAD or Sumerian families, where in America, the origin of the what? The Akkadian or Sumerian families, where in America. Make sure to catch part 1 and 2, guys. You missed a lot of info if you didn't see those. I know you might be a little lost. Like, what's this book about? What is it really saying? He just read this. It makes no sense. Check out parts 1 and 2, guys. And then it'll make all sense. All right. All right. I'm going to leave it here. Probably got another video coming later on. All right. So I do appreciate you guys taking the time, though, to, come hear me read this and finish the book with me. I wanted to read it with you guys. So thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed it, the whole book, not just today's video, but the 3 parts. Go Go ahead and watch the 3 parts together. You guys see how important, how revealing this information is, and apply that to what we've learned about ancient America, and you guys start seeing it's so obvious, like they were saying, it's so evident, it's so obvious that the origin of civilizations and culture and all that was here in the Americas. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.